are born with. We are born as social beings, immediately in connection with others. And we are born with a longing to be fully recognized by the other and to recognize the other in a mutual encounter that brings us to life. And that is actually the experience of love when it occurs. Every newborn child is born with this spirit and immediately shows it. That's why newborn children are fully present in their eyes. They look right at you, and you feel, we adults feel ourselves, an immediate experience of joy by being pulled by the child out of the more detached way of existing that we've become accustomed to into a direct experience of mutual recognition. The problem that we face here in adulthood is that we exist in a world in which that desire for mutual sight and mutual affirmation and authentic social connection is everywhere denied around us. We pass each other with blank gazes on the street. We find ourselves enveloped in artificial ways of being and acting. When watching the news one night, the newscaster was a very stiff person, but he had the classic newscaster persona, and he said, "The Red Sox win and a fire in Dorchester, back in a moment." And his gestures were slightly delayed, as if he was performing something and watching himself perform it. And the tone of his voice was had that artificial enthusiasm, and the Red Sox winning and a fire that burned down a building were being equated with each other in some random way as the news. So the newscaster was simultaneously presenting himself as if he were someone, the person talking, and yet in some way he was emptying his true being from how he was acting. He was not a real person. He was not able to be a real person when playing his role. I felt pushed back into the couch as I watched him. I didn't feel drawn out to him as another human being. He wasn't trying to recognize me in a human way, but was rather performing a self that was not who he really was. Why was he doing that? Well, in some way, he was feeling the need to conceal his own heartfelt, open-hearted presence as a human being behind a persona that protected him from the other person watching him, and that he actually believed was himself as he was speaking. If you take the two notions of passing each other with blank gazes on the street and the newscaster performing the persona, and you begin to realize how much all of us exist inside envelopes, patternings of life in which we peer out from our separated location at other people quickly moving past us, glancing with a glancing glance at one another as they do, or seeing people perform their roles very rapidly, averting their eyes, not really making contact with us, not really coming into supple interconnection with us, not seeing me as a thou and looking at me, as Martin Buber would have put it, and I not seeing the other as a thou, but instead glancing off each other in a very surface way. We realize that we don't really live in a world in which our longing to mutually recognize one another can be fully realized. Because the desire that is part of our very social nature, the desire in all of us is always present. So in every interaction, in every moment of our lives, that longing pulses through us, and we try, always try, to connect with each other, even though we feel coerced, we feel unable to realize that desire, because we ourselves have been conditioned in an environment of partial artificiality, or of what I call in the book, the false self. The desire for mutual recognition, social movements, and the dissolution of the false self. The book is about this essential social quality within us that is the force that gives our life meaning and gives us a continual sense of both longing and hope, and also understanding the way in which we're penned in by our separation because of our fear of each other that is manifested in the various ways that we, without being conscious of it, distance each other just by being ourselves. That fear of each other it's something that's been passed down to us through the generations. It's part of our conditioning. It's thousands of years of fear caused by scarcity of resources, climatic disasters, fear itself, reproducing itself. It's the so far not fully evolved nature of being a social person that we have not evolved to the point yet of fully discovering each other's presence, and in fully discovering each other's presence, realizing this central desire to authentically recognize one another as human. That will be the redemption of our kind of human beings when it actually occurs. So this book is written to try to help that process along by describing the world in its alienated form and longing form as that double reality coexists for all of us as we live through it. Actually, let me say a word about why social movements and the dissolution of the false self. So the key upward force in the process of the evolving of the soul that I'm trying to describe historically is in the experience of struggles for social justice that are manifested in movements. The very word movement is actually describing a movement of being, since no one physically moves anywhere except when dancing or marching. But a social movement is really a movement of internal force within a group, in which, in the rising awareness of the social movement, people suddenly become present to each other, suddenly recognize each other in a way that they did not before when they were isolated and separated by their mutual distance. And so the idea in the subtitle of the book is that if and when social movements arise, true social movements, not social movements that are aimed at maintaining our alienation, like reactionary movements based on domination or racism or demonization of others, but rather authentic social movements in which we arise into mutual presence and discover each other's humanity. When that occurs, that false self that the newscaster was, you might say, throwing up or placing between you and me, that false self that exists in all of us begins to very rapidly dissolve, and another more full presence of ourselves comes into existence in relationship to everyone else. The rising period of social movements is often, in fact, I would say always, characterized by the upsurge of mutual recognition, the joy and relief that comes from that sudden recognition of each other's full humanity, each other's beauty, each other's full presence to us as fully human.